Let's have a look at what's happening in the world first, because what we are about to watch or to see has a lot to do with what we are going to talk about later. Let's watch together first a small clip.
Now.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Last night, the Israeli army ordered half the population of Gaza, 1.1 million residents, to evacuate their homes within 24 hours from northern Gaza to the south, in what many Palestinians fear is the start of a second Nakba. The UN said the mass transfer of half of Gaza's population would have devastating humanitarian consequences. This comes as Israel's bombed Gaza for 7 straight days, killing at least 1,500 people. Joining us now, Noura Erakat, Palestinian human rights attorney, associate professor at Rutgers University, author of Justice for Some, Law and the Question of Palestine. She's speaking to us from Philadelphia. Noura, if you can respond to this order and what's happening in Gaza.
Good morning, Amy, and thank you. Your reporting has been an oasis in a sea of warmongering across mainstream media, for which I have deep contempt at this moment. They have mobilized almost every racial trope of savagery, barbarian. They have built on Islamophobia and the infrastructure of the war on terror to create a common sense, logical conclusion that war is inevitable and whatever consequences come out is the fault of Hamas, thereby further blaming the victims for their own killing and massacres. At this point, we have to understand that there is no military solution. There has never been a military solution to this. Hamas cannot be eradicated. As we've seen right now, Palestinians are being killed, pulled from out of the rubble. We have not given them hope. I saw a young girl staring in trauma at the screen, her entire family decimated. What will happen to this young girl in 20 years? What will we tell her? That Israel had no choice, that this was your fault, and now your future is to continue to be stuck in an open-air prison? There must be hope, and that hope lies in a political solution and in the responsibility of the international community to dismantle an apartheid system, to dismantle prolonged military occupation, the longest in the world, to lift a debilitating siege that has condemned Palestinians to slow death. This is a human-made disaster, a catastrophe, according to the World Health Organization. This is not a crisis. It is a humanitarian catastrophe. If we are to create a future, it has to begin and end with a political and diplomatic solution.
The world is moving in favor of Palestinians. And on the other side of that movement are the institutions that govern that part of the world and the rest of the world. And the desperation that we see in these governments is demonstrated by the actions they are taking. Take a look at what you see here. In Europe, constitutional rights have been thrown out of the window. Nations whose constitutions guarantee the right to protest are throwing that constitution out of the window, and they are banning protests that support Palestinian rights. In Paris, in Berlin, in Netherlands, in other places in Europe, if you go out to protest or to support the Palestinians, you run the risk of being arrested by the governments. That democracy, that human right of the right to protest, the right to demonstrate, is out of the window. If you think that the Palestinians are the only casualty of Israel's war, of Israel's brutality, of the Zionist regime, the apartheid regime that the Zionists have created in Palestine, think again. Because in Europe, freedoms are being restricted to support a Zionist apartheid regime, a dictatorship in Palestine. And not only are they doing this by restricting freedoms, they are also using weapons of war to protect that regime. The United States is mobilizing the second aircraft carrier, and they have just sent a whole plane load of ammunition. Desperation has reached unprecedented proportions, with the outpour of people's sympathy and people's support for the Palestinians. Has it stopped the people? No, it hasn't. The movement is continuing. The more oppressive tactics are undertaken by the governments in Europe to suppress the support for the Palestinians, the more people rise up in support of the Palestinians. This is a moment of truth. Those of us who are old enough to have seen how the apartheid regime in South Africa was brought down, remember that it wasn't governments that brought it down. It wasn't the US government. It wasn't the British government. It wasn't the French government or the German government or the Dutch government or the Chinese government, Russian government, or any government in the world. It was the movement of people as you have seen now. That is what brought down the apartheid regime. In fact, Western governments were supporting the apartheid regime in South Africa because that regime served Western colonial geopolitical objectives in Africa. And therefore, its existence served their purpose. The same way that the Zionist regime in Palestine is serving the colonial objectives or geopolitical purpose of the same Western colonial powers here in this region, in what they call the Middle East, which is something that a term that I do not like to use. And if you want to know why I have given a whole talk about that, you can find it in the description. I'm linking it. You will understand why I don't like to use the term Middle East. But these geocolonial objectives here in this region, and by extension in the whole of Asia, are served by the existence of a Zionist regime in Palestine. Those who created it, the Balfour Declaration that created it, and those who are funding it and arming it and sustaining its existence don't give a hoot about Jews. It is naive to think that Western powers are doing this for the sake of the Jews. You have to listen to what Joe Biden says. Listen to this.
We look at the Middle East. I think it's about time we stop, those of us who support, as most of us do, Israel in this body, for apologizing for our support for Israel. There's no apology to be made. None. It is the best $3 billion investment we make. Were there not an Israel, the United States of America would have to invent an Israel to protect her interest in the region. The United States would have to go out and invent an Israel.
Okay. So, if you think that this is all about protecting Jews and creating a state for Jews and all that, you're fine to believe whatever you want. But you have seen it very clearly described here by Joe Biden. If there was no Israel, they would have had to invent one. If there was no Israel to serve as a military outpost, which it is, a military base turned into a state where everybody is armed and trained and ready to go to battle. If that did not exist, they will have to create one. They will have to build more warships and more military bases in the region. They don't have to do that because they've got Israel. That's the colonial objective for creating Israel. And that colonial objective that we see now being practiced through the creation, since the creation of the Zionist regime, was the same colonial objective in South Africa during the apartheid regime of South Africa. Same. That was supported by Western governments to represent Western geopolitical interests in Africa. And it was brought down not by governments, it was brought down by people. And that is why the only way to bring down the Zionist regime in Palestine, this colonial outpost, military outpost, it cannot be done by Western governments. It has to be done by people. The same way we did with the apartheid regime in South Africa, it has the same strategy must work with the apartheid regime in Palestine. If you believe that you can bring down the Zionist regime in Palestine by depending on the same people who created it, who are funding it, who are arming it, the same governments who are doing that, they will help you bring it down, then you can also believe in anything else that you like. We have seen what happened in South Africa. Now we have to repeat it in Palestine. And we have allies in this, the Jews themselves. Many Jews do not accept the existence of a Zionist regime in Palestine, especially because the crimes that are being committed in Palestine are being committed in the name of Jews. And many Jews don't like that, especially those who have had their own families die in the Holocaust. And now they see that every time the Holocaust card is being used.
In an open-air prison where 2.2 million people live, almost half of whom are children, they are now without food and water and electricity and fuel, and they are being bombed. They are being rained down on with white phosphorus. As Jewish New Yorkers, we are here to say Not in our names! Not in our name! Not in our name! Not in our name! Not in our name! Not in our name!
Go on. Go ahead.
Hi. During your speech, you made a lot of references to Jewish people as well as certain people in your audience, not Jewish people in general, but certain people, especially in your audience, to Nazis. Now, that is extremely offensive when certain people are German. And they're also extremely offensive to people who've actually suffered under Nazi rule.
I don't respect that anymore. I really don't. I don't like and I don't respect the crocodile tears the crocodile tears. No. I'm sorry, folks. Allow me to finish and allow me to finish. Listen, sir. Allow me to finish. Sir, I don't like to play before an audience the Holocaust card. But since now I feel compelled to. My late father was in Auschwitz. My late mother, please shut up. My late father was in Auschwitz. My late mother was in Majdanek concentration camp. Every single member of my family on my father's side,
The Jews did not take arms against the
my
Germans!
late father was in Auschwitz concentration camp. My late mother was in Majdanek concentration camp. Every single member of my family on both sides was exterminated. Both of my parents were in the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. And it's precisely and exactly because of the lessons my parents taught me and my two siblings that I will not be silent when Israel commits its crimes against the Palestinians. And I consider nothing more despicable than to use their suffering and their martyrdom to try to justify the torture, the brutalization, the demolition of homes that Israel daily commits against the Palestinians. So I refuse any longer to be intimidated or browbeaten by the tears. If you had any heart in you, you would be crying for the Palestinians, not for what's been done.
Yes, if you have tears, you will cry for the Palestinians. Not for the guys who are raining bombs on them right now. Children, women, old people, raising the whole place down the ground. It's not the first time they've done that. And it continues to be done. It has been going on for 75 years. You will be crying for these people. But tell that to John Kirby, tell that to Anthony Blinken, or tell that to their boss, Joe Biden. In order to advance their political objectives in the region, and which necessitates the maintenance of this military base they have created in Palestine called Israel. US and Western colonial powers are ready to deploy anything in their arsenal. Money, aircraft carriers, B-52 bombers, crocodile tears, Holocaust card, you name it, they will use it to ensure that Israel is maintained and nothing endangers Israel. That's why you see all these major mobilization of resources in the media, in the military, in money. Everything is being mobilized, including emotions. Those two are being mobilized. And people are being killed. It doesn't matter. But the most important thing is that the regime created in Israel, that Zionist regime, must be maintained at any cost. And let's look at the deployment of some crocodile tears and Holocaust card that Norman Finkelstein was talking about just a few minutes ago. Take a look.
Like this.
Sorry, it's very, excuse me, very difficult to look at these images, Jake, and the human cost. And these are human beings. They're family members, they're friends, they're loved ones, cousins, brothers, sisters. Yeah, it's difficult, and I apologize.
Seriously, I'm not sure if I should laugh or cry. One thing is for sure, that guy has a great career, if he goes to Hollywood. He has a great future there. I mean, the guy is good. You have to admit it. He is good. I mean, as a military, as an admiral of the Navy, as a political operator, he is good. So good that I will tell him, go to Hollywood, young man. Don't waste your time here. I don't know what they're paying him in the White House, but Hollywood, he'll do wonders. Let's look at his colleague, Anthony Blinken. Yeah, he's not bad as well, huh? He's good. Watch.
Come before you not only as the United States Secretary of State, but also as a Jew. My grandfather, Maurice Blinken, fled pogroms in Russia. My stepfather, Samuel Pizarro, survived concentration camps, Auschwitz, Dachau, Majdanek. So, Prime Minister, I understand on a personal level the harrowing echoes that Hamas's massacres carry for Israeli Jews, indeed, for Jews everywhere.
Here we are. Crocodile tears, tick. Holocaust card, tick. We're waiting to see the B-52 bombers and the aircraft carriers. Waiting to see if those also will be brought in. They have been deployed, they're waiting. Let's see what happens next. The tears you saw in John Kirby and the Holocaust card you saw from Anthony Eden were to drive emotions in the Western public to justify what Israel is doing in Gaza. Let's have a look at that now. Take a look at what Israel is doing in Gaza. And that's not the evil that Anthony Eden was talking about, Anthony Blinken, was talking about. He was talking about Hamas and what Hamas has done to the Jews everywhere. What has Hamas done to the Jews everywhere? Hamas attacked intelligence centers in Israel, Israeli intelligence centers. Hamas attacked military barracks, Israeli military barracks. Hamas attacked military checkpoints of Israel. Hamas attacked the settlers who were armed and trained fighters and took some of them prisoners, they and their families, prisoners. There are 5,000 illegal prisoners held in Israeli jails. And when they talk, when John Kirby talks about releasing hostages, he's not talking about the 5,000 Palestinians who have been held there for more than 10 years without trial. He's talking about the 150 or 130 prisoners taken by Hamas during the last week. That's the objective of this whole exercise that you hear about our objectives in the United Nations issuing a resolution for the release of hostages. We didn't see the United Nations issuing a resolution for the release of 5,000 Palestinians held in Israeli jails without trials. Never. Anthony Blinken is crying now, throwing the Holocaust card. He forgets that over the years, over the past 75 years, the Holocaust that has been happening to the Palestinians, uprooted from their homes, uprooted from their farms, evicted, have their homes bulldozed, sent out, evicted in their millions. Today there are 2.2 million refugees in Gaza, in that small space called Gaza. And now they are trying to do some ethnic cleansing and sending them out of there. They are telling them, move out, we are bombing. So the choice that the Gaza people in Gaza have is that either stay and be bombed or leave and never have the possibility of coming back. Because as the Americans and the Israelis are saying, well, coming back, that's a political decision. That's what they've been telling us. It's a political decision coming back. There's no guarantee that if you leave Gaza today, you will come back. Assuming there will still be a Gaza to come back to. Assuming you will still have a home to come back to. This is ethnic cleansing happening right in front of our eyes, and Anthony Blinken and John Kirby are crying and using the Holocaust card to justify these crimes. Exactly what those Jews in New York were saying, not in our name. Don't do this in our name. And Norman Finkelstein is saying, stop using the memory of our parents to justify the crimes that Israel is doing today. That's what's happening here.
Everywhere. In this moment, where evil, hatred, and madness have once more taken so many innocent lives.
You see, because for these people, history started on the 7th of October. The day that the Palestinians decided to hit back. That's when history started, life started, time started. Everything before that doesn't matter. How we got to 7th of October doesn't matter. What kind of oppression brought 7th of October doesn't matter. Listen to Christine Amanpour interviewing the Palestinian ambassador to the UK. Listen to the first question. First and foremost, you see, first and foremost, do you condemn? Because for her, first and foremost was 7th of October, 2023. Not 75 years ago. Not the things that happened since 75 years. That's not important for Christine Amanpour and for CNN, because that doesn't exist for them. What exists is what happened on the 7th of October. Life started from there. First and foremost, Christine Amanpour starts her interview. Listen to her.
So let's bring in Hussam Zomlot now. He's head of the Palestinian mission to the UK. Welcome to the program. First and foremost, do you condemn what Hamas did inside Israel to Israeli civilians? There are dead and there are hostages.
First and foremost, the Western media must really abandon this framework that has gotten us to where.
The second question is even worse than the first. Do you support the killing of civilians? Christine Amanpour wants to know if the Palestinian ambassador to the United Kingdom supports the killing of civilians. Tell me about dinosaurs of journalism. Really, I mean, some people should not be journalists anymore with that kind line of questioning. And I don't know why CNN has got, there's a list of dinosaurs in the CNN that I can give CNN and tell them it's time they go home now. Do you support the killing of civilians? Seriously, Christine? Think about it.
We are today.
Okay, but I just want to know, do you support the killing of civilians?
Of course not. Of course not. Of course not.
So do you condemn that?
The loss of civilian life is tragic in all sides.
And that's the whole moral standing. That if you truly claim to be the descendants of people against whom such a crime was committed, you will not be committing it against others. It is impossible on one hand to say, this happened to my parents and now I'm going to do the same thing to somebody else's parents and somebody else's children. It just doesn't work. And so when we hear people like Benjamin Netanyahu or people like Anthony Blinken throwing that Holocaust card, overused Holocaust card, and then bringing in ships and weapons to exterminate an entire population in Gaza, you must sit back and start wondering, are these people true to the memory of those who were exterminated? These are just political operators whose only objective is to use the memory of people who were exterminated to exterminate another group of people so that they can achieve their political advantage in this region. And as I have explained, the whole idea of creating a Zionist state in Palestine is the same like creating that state in South Africa, the apartheid state. These two apartheid states in South Africa, which has been demolished, and the one in Palestine, which must be demolished, have the same objective, achieving geopolitical objectives. And Jews know that. And there are Jews who do not want to be associated with that. Here they are.
Society, and in particular the younger generation, reject with disgust this attempt to silence them. They know enough to call the bluff and understand the full meaning of solidarity with the Palestinians. They demonstrate in the streets, in their campuses, and join the Palestinians on the ground at a personal cost to show how outrageous it is to call the pure struggle for justice anti-Semitic. If you are an anti-Zionist today, you are not only standing firmly on a sound moral base in condemning this ideology that generates all these crimes, you are also expressing your disgust at the hypocrisy of your government, mainstream media, and academia.
It's your state. Yes, it's your state, Professor Feldman. It's not the state of my pupils, Palestino-Israeli pupils, and I have Palestino-Israeli pupils in Tel Aviv University. Then I ask you, seriously, defining myself as Jew, continue to be a Jew in Israel today, it's unmoral, because a Jew in the state of Israel is a privileged citizen. True or not true? Somebody contest it? And I don't speak of the occupied territories. 47 years, a population without any political civic rights. Not 47 days, not 47 weeks, not 47 months, 47 years. In the Western world is thinking, we need a peace process.
Listen to Professor Avi Shleim, a renowned Jewish scholar who was born in Iraq, grew up in Iraq, and lived among Arabs in Iraq, lived in Palestine as a Jew, even joined the Israeli Defense Force, the Israeli army, served in that Israeli army as a very convinced Jew, or a very convinced Israeli, let us say, and now probably lives in the United Kingdom, I think.
And the theme of my memoir is Memoir of an Arab Jew, because an Arab Jew is a very controversial concept in Israel today, because there is a dichotomy in everything. There is an Arab-Israeli conflict. So in Israel today, you can say you are a Romanian Jew or a French Jew or even a German Jew, despite the associations between Germany and the Holocaust. But you can't say you're an Arab Jew. That's considered an oxymoron, a contradiction in terms. If you are a Jew, you can't be an Arab, and if you are an Arab, you cannot be a Jew. But there is no better way to describe the identity of my family and my initial identity. It was that of an Arab Jew. We were a Jewish family in an Arab country, living very comfortably, very happily, at complete peace and harmony with our neighbors. And we were Arab Jews until the rise of nationalism in the 20th century. Arab nationalism on the one hand, Jewish nationalism or Zionism on the other hand, the clash between the two, the conflict in Palestine, and it was these conflicting nationalism that made coexistence between Muslims and Jews impossible.
He talks about how we lived together before the creation of the State of Israel, the harmony that existed between people here, regardless of their religious background, and how this was broken by the creation of the State of Israel. And he has got very clear ideas of why the State of Israel is an apartheid regime. You have to listen to him.
And recently, the Israeli human rights organization, B'Tselem, issued a report. And in the past, this is a very well-respected, honest human rights organization. In the past, B'Tselem used to be critical only of the occupation and the abuses of human rights in the occupied territories. But in this last report, the title is something like Jewish Supremacy or Jewish Supremacist Regime, this is apartheid. And it said, we can no longer distinguish between the West Bank and Israel. It's one unit with one government, with one rule, with two classes of citizens, and this is apartheid. Now, I began to answer your question by saying that Israel is officially a racist state. So this was my view all along, that Israel is an apartheid regime. But in July 2018, the Knesset, the parliament, passed the nation-state law. This is a basic law. Israel doesn't have a written constitution, but it has two categories of laws, regular laws, ordinary laws, everything, and some basic laws which define the character of the state. And the 2018 nation-state law says that the Jews have a unique right to national self-determination, a unique right, which means an exclusive right. So that creates two classes of citizens within Israel proper, not between Israel and the occupied territories. Within Israel proper, only the Jews have the right to national self-determination. So by its own basic law, Israel is an apartheid state.
So, that's Avi Shlaim, a well-known historian who lived in Palestine and who lived among Arabs as well, and is now, I think he lives in England now. He tells you that by their own basic law, the structure that they have introduced within Israel, in Palestine, in fact, let's call it by its real name. The basic law that they introduced in Palestine is that state called Israel is an apartheid state. And that is a danger, not just for the other people in Palestine, but it's a danger for the Jews themselves, because that apartheid state has denied and continues to deny the Jews the opportunity of living with other people in harmony, as they used to do before the Zionist apartheid state was created. And this is something that is being fought against not just by the rest of us, who must continue to fight against this apartheid regime the way we did with South Africa, but the Jews themselves are fighting against it because they know what kind of dangers it imposes on their own lives and their own harmony with other people, how it singles them out and turns them possibly into targets with other people. Because when you start to create a state that is religiously created for the benefit of one group of people, you are actually turning them into targets of hate and targets of revolt by other people who are being oppressed by that apartheid state. It's the natural reaction of anyone. It happened in South Africa. It happened in Nazi Germany. Look at Nazi Germany. The same ideology of Nazis, which is being practiced today in Palestine by the Zionists. These are identical ideologies, different names, same ideology. And here in Palestine, the Zionist regime is again repeating the same Nazi ideology of creating a state for a specific group of people to the exclusion of all others. And this is not just affecting Muslims in Palestine. It's all Palestinians, whether Muslims, Christians, or of other religious or non-religious denominations. Everyone is being affected by the same apartheid and racist system. Let's take a look at some of these clips that will tell us what's happening. But first, let us look at how apartheid is being practiced on the ground. Now, we have seen it theoretically, the law, the discussion. Let's look at it on a practical, day-to-day way it is affecting the lives of Palestinians. Let's take a look here.
Have you ever had that creeping feeling that with every step you take, you're being watched? Ever worried that every family you've ever embraced might be known and traced? Imagine if mundane everyday decisions, such as meeting a friend for a coffee in town, had to be a calculated act of resistance. That you might be patted down, harassed, or processed biometrically, simply for being born with the wrong last name in the wrong location to the wrong racial group or nationality. Your daily life filled with the threat of detention, your nation occupied by a military force, now equipped with new powerful yet hidden facial recognition. Consider for a moment the sheer scale of these surveillance technologies enabling human rights abuses. Imagine automated apartheid in Palestine. Imagine stopping it. In February 2022, Amnesty International identified the situation in Israel and the occupied Palestinian territories as apartheid. A cocktail of military and legal policies are being put in place which are preventing Palestinians from being able to access their basic rights and services.
We're often told that the situation in the occupied Palestinian territories is quite complicated, but it's not complicated, it's apartheid. Since 1967, 800,000 Palestinians have been detained. As of April 2023, 1,016 Palestinians are being held without trial. Between the 29th of September 2000 and the 31st of January 2023, some 6,000 Palestinians were killed outside armed conflict. 1,848 of those were children. But what we don't see on the news are the sort of quiet ways that infringes on people's daily life. That we can't see the feeling that creates, the feeling of being watched constantly, the feeling of uncertainty around, if someone leaves the house, are they going to come back that day?
The term apartheid was originally used in response to the political system in South Africa. But international law, the conventions and treaties that condemn, prohibit, and criminalize apartheid are drafted to apply to all states in a universal way.
For a long time, we've known the first piece of this puzzle, that is the physical infrastructure. So checkpoints, watchtowers, cameras.
When you get stopped at a checkpoint, you're stopped by, a soldier with a gun who will ask for your ID, and you don't know what will happen after you've had that interaction. And so it's about control, but it's about the separation and making it very clear that there are some rules that only apply to Palestinians.
So our kids, while walking to school, are asked to open their backpacks. And you see how the kids are struggling. For example, the other day, a child was screaming, like, I have an exam, I'm late. They wanted to open everything. They wanted to check. Or when you open a backpack of a young girl carrying pads. It's so exposing, so it is surveillance.
Surveillance towers spread all over Jerusalem. I've seen over the past 10 years rapid development of infrastructure that is meant to suppress and control the Palestinian population living under occupation in Jerusalem.
Throughout this year, we see not only a huge increase in the amount of cameras, over threefolds the amount of cameras, but also the blockage of pedestrian gates, increased surveillance around the main sites.
Being and living in the old city of Jerusalem shows you the power of occupation. It's so visible, even if it's invisible. You can see it in the cameras around you. The big cameras, the small cameras, the hidden cameras, the flying cameras. You can see it in the amount of the police and the soldiers, the military that is around.
The Israeli forces of occupation have devised different methods. They've changed the architecture of the streets, of the squares, to prevent people from gathering and prevent people from pursuing their social activities in a normal capacity.
Just look at Damascus Gate and what they call the watchtower, what we call the killing boxes.
We see that the architecture has been turned into a photographic studio. Lighting has been placed on both sides of the entrance to Damascus Gate, with cameras facing the people as they enter through the gate, walking towards the streets of the old city.
You're probably used to seeing and hearing about low-resolution CCTV in black and white. These cameras are of an entirely different making. We're talking about high-resolution 4K cameras that can sometimes capture you of up to 200 meters of distance, and we're talking about cameras that plug into network systems that use databases to identify you. And then I want you to think about the fact that these cameras are pointed at mosques, at hospitals, at schools, and at people's homes.
No movement can be actually achieved from the Palestinian area without a person being surveilled throughout the entire route.
It's a sense of being policed all the time. And being policed not as a normal person being policed. You're talking about a state whereby we are the other and the otherized. We are the occupied.
To safeguard the settlers, Hebron's sacred old city is under military lockdown. Some parts of H2 have been designated sterile, that's the official term, areas where Palestinians are forbidden. Over the years, the locals have seen the environment around them transformed, inch by inch, house by house, checkpoint by checkpoint.
Hebron is full of what the Israeli military likes to call friction, that lends itself to many new ways to innovate technologies that promise to reduce this so-called friction and make Israel's occupation more humanitarian for Palestinians. This is what the Israeli military claims. The streets are covered in CCTV cameras, in facial recognition cameras that give the Israeli military and the intelligence forces a full 24/7 and encompassing view of Palestinian life in the city. I think the best word for it is carceral. The feeling that prison is not within a bounded space, but it follows you wherever you go, into the city's streets, in your home, into your bedroom, and that there's no escape.
Over the last 5 years, the number of settler attacks against Palestinians has risen by almost 200%. In Hebron, they happen almost every day. The Israeli military likes to call Hebron a smart city. It's a euphemism for the elaborate system of surveillance and facial recognition they are operating here on Palestinians.
If we count how many cameras we have here, how many cameras you can see? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 cameras.
Izzat al-Karaki lives in H2. He walked me through how the cameras and checkpoints shape his everyday routine.
We have 22 Israeli checkpoints as the one you see. What you have to know that this checkpoint recognize me even before I get into the checkpoint. Sometimes the soldier tell me, Izzat, give me your ID. He knows my name already. They know that I'm crossing the checkpoint 10 times per day, but each time they have to check my body to let me get into my house. Not only that, Palestinians are levels for them, which is red, yellow, and green. If you are Palestinian, and you have been arrested by the army, you might be in the red level. For example, if you are known to them and they know you resist occupation, you might be like, in the yellow. Sometimes when I want to cross the checkpoint, the soldier can keep me 3 hours for no reason. This is the Israeli law. So if they want to kill your day, they can easily do it. They can keep you at the checkpoint for 3 hours. After that, nothing will happen. They will not be accountable at all.
It's something you hear across Hebron, an awareness that the all-seeing gaze of the city's network of cameras are designed to protect the settlers, not Palestinians. It's not just the density of cameras in Palestinian neighborhoods that gives it away. It's the direction they face, often inwards towards people's homes, invading their most intimate spaces. Tamer lives in a neighborhood just outside the old city. 2 years ago, Israeli soldiers forced their way into her home and turned her roof into a surveillance post.
هون احنا عايشين اصلا مش عايشين من مرة لانه الضغط علينا ومنحس حالنا مش في بيوتنا في الشارع يعني احنا ضيوفنا ما بيجوا يزورونا العيد لما يصير العيد ما بيجوا بخافوا يجوا اهلي على بيتي زي ما انت شايف الضغط علينا من كل الشقات المستوطنين من شقة والكاميرات من شقة يعني وين ما نروح في تل الميدة بنحس حالنا مراقبين دايما مراقبين وين ما كان هاي مش حياة ولا عيشة.
Israeli authorities are trying to collate and create a database exclusively consisting of Palestinian faces. So the idea is that when you're arriving at the checkpoint, if that information exists on you, such as who is related to you, have you been here before, are you due to be taken in for detention or questioning, that is flagged on the system and a soldier is able to decide whether you can pass or not. They can no longer count on the soldier perhaps recognizing them or knowing them because it's a computer system into which they have been conscripted without their knowledge or without their consent. They now have to be processed through a machine learning algorithm before they get to live their lives, whether it's by getting to access education, work, or medical services. That's now governed by this AI system.
Artificial intelligence has created what feels like a digitally mediated prison in Hebron. The military recently installed this autonomous weapon, a so-called smart shooter. It's powered by AI, which means it can shoot without human intervention. Amnesty has also documented the use of something called anomalies detection, sensors and algorithms that flag the presence of individuals or objects that the Israeli military would consider out of the ordinary. In addition, soldiers use a number of overlapping programs that collate information on Palestinians to monitor and govern their movement. The first, previously unreported system is Red Wolf. That's the one used at permanent checkpoints, where Palestinians are biometrically registered and assessed against information held on them. Soldiers teach Red Wolf by pairing new faces with IDs and other biographical information. Then there's Blue Wolf, a facial recognition app Israeli forces use in the field, on raids or at temporary checkpoints, to capture photos of Palestinians. The third system is White Wolf, an app for settlers, allowing them to check if Palestinian workers have the correct permits. It gives the settlers access to confidential government data. Connecting all of this is Wolfpack, a database that aims to build a profile of every Palestinian in the West Bank, including information like a person's name, where they live, their family members, car license plates, and whether they are wanted or not.
According to testimonies from veterans, Israeli soldiers are even incentivized to compete with one another over who can collect the most data and photos of Palestinians. It's just one of the ways the occupation here in Hebron is being gamified.
This creates an idea that Palestinians are just objects out there waiting to be photographed, and that may help your unit to reach some form of reward, but is ultimately leading to dehumanization of an entire racialized group.
If that is not apartheid, I don't know what is. And I cannot imagine, even in South Africa, that they had such a brutal system of apartheid. The tools that you just saw here, which are used for surveillance, and they are even affixed to look at what you're doing in the privacy of your own home, because this surveillance is not just in restaurants and shops and streets. It's also in people's homes, especially in places like Hebron, Al-Khalil. People's homes are being surveilled. The surveillance cameras pointing to their sitting rooms and their bedrooms, and probably their toilets too. You need to have that kind of filthy mind, and that kind of a very, very low kind of human being to actually put a camera to look at what a person does in his or her home. But that's the oasis of democracy they have created in our midst. So they tell us. So they tell us. But here is the other thing. That these surveillance tools are being sold to nations who are going to use them against their own citizens, and they are already there. Billions are being spent. Luckily, Hamas has demonstrated to all the customers who are buying Pegasus and buying other tools of espionage and spending billions to buy these tools. Hamas has demonstrated to them that it doesn't work. That none of these fortresses are strong enough to prevent people who are determined to break them down. And that the only true fortress that you can build to protect yourself and protect the peace and tranquility of your country doesn't look like a fortress. That fortress looks like a bridge between people. But that's not the kind of thing that the rulers of Israel and the rulers and those who are supporting them understand. They don't understand that kind of logic. For them, the only logic that they understand is what's happening in Gaza today. That's the tragedy. And of course, the only solution they will come up with is not a solution to say, let's solve this and let's find a solution that all of us can live with peacefully. No, they will go back home, they will go back to their drawing boards and say, where were the loopholes? Why the surveillance tools didn't work? Why the weapons we had didn't work as effectively as we wanted them? Let's make them more effective. Let's make the tools of surveillance more effective because they didn't work the first time. That's the mentality they have. And so this war will continue because nobody is looking for solutions. Everybody is looking for cover. Those who created Israel are looking for methods to preserve and protect Israel as an entity that serves their geopolitical objectives in the region. And those who are selling the Holocaust internationally and are making money out of it, want to continue the business through this image of an Israel that is under attack. And every time you attack that fortress, they will pull out the Holocaust card. And just in case anybody thinks that this fight, this struggle that's going on in Palestine is between Jews and Muslims, and because that's the way the Western media is trying to promote this, and the Zionist regime in Palestine is trying to promote this. This is a method of divide and rule. No, this is a struggle in which Christians are also involved, and they are suffering the same pain that the Muslim population of Palestine is suffering. It's not a fight between one community of Palestine and another community of Palestine. No. Christians are suffering the same pain, and they are part of the struggle. Yes, okay, there is a majority which is Muslim, and therefore Muslims are taking a stronger position in this fight, maybe because they're the majority, maybe because they are targeted more than anybody else. Any number of reasons you can think of. But do not forget that the Christians are equally suffering in this fight. Since the days of the Crusades, when they came from the West to commit the crimes they committed in that Holy Land, Christians were also victimized in the same way that Muslims were. Go back to the books of history and you will find that the people, the victims of the Crusades in the ancient times were not just Muslims. They were Muslims and Christians and other communities, but both were targeted. Today, Zionism is targeting all communities, not just Muslims in Palestine. Look at what's happening to the Christians in Palestine. Take a look.
In northern Israel, a Catholic parade thanks God for protecting the image of Virgin Mary. Today, it's these Christians who feel they need protection.
These extremists, whether Muslim, whether Jews, is raising more and more.
We are afraid because there was an escalation, very dangerous escalation.
That escalation is of hate crimes against Christians in Israel. In this Jerusalem church, the words "Jesus is garbage" was scrawled on the side wall. At the Vatican's Jerusalem headquarters, recent graffiti threatened death to Arabs and Christians and all those who hate Israel. The church believes the perpetrators are ultra-nationalist Orthodox Jews. Outside the site, believed to be both King David's tomb and the Last Supper room, they protest a rumor the building will be handed over to the Vatican.
If someone will give up 1 inch from that tomb, they'll start a war between Jews and Christians. God forgive us.
Israeli police must protect everyone equally, and they say they're trying to protect Christians.
Action has been taken in the past by police operations as well as undercover operations, not just the Israeli National Police, but also secret security services who have also been involved. That's how seriously we're taking and dealing with those incidents.
But the church believes this isn't only about police. The Holy Land's top Catholic official says some Israeli schools teach hate. Some Israeli politicians preach exclusions. As the Pope arrives, some Christians living in what they consider the holiest place on earth say they feel neither welcome nor protected.
Okay, the final word. I want to leave the final word after we listen to these 3 people, what they are saying. Just 3 people, let's give them a chance to show us which kind of mindset we are dealing with. Take a look.
Do you believe that Hamas must be eliminated entirely?
Yes, I do.
That's the first one. Joe Biden, President of the Democratic Republic of the United States of America. The guy who is complaining that his opponent is undemocratic. He thinks Hamas, which was elected and won a very big majority in the last elections that were supervised even by one of Joe Biden's predecessors, a man called Jimmy Carter, whose foundation participated in supervising the elections with other organizations. And it was Jimmy Carter who described the elections to be very clean. Listen to what Jimmy Carter said to Avi Shlaim describing the elections of Hamas.
The Hamas political leadership is much more pragmatic, and in a series of statements, they made it clear that they would settle for a 2-state solution along the 1967 borders. And they chose not violence, but the parliamentary road to power. And Hamas formed as a political party, and there was an all-Palestinian elections on the West Bank and Gaza in January 2006. Hamas ran for election against Fatah, which is the ruling party of the Palestinian Authority, and Hamas won an absolute and clear majority. This was, there were 200 international monitors. They all said the same thing. This was an orderly, peaceful, clean election. The Carter Center monitored the election, and Jimmy Carter, I met him when he came to collect his honorary degree from Oxford, and he said to me, this was one of the most peaceful, free and fair elections he had ever attended anywhere. The West says they believe in democracy. Here there was democracy in action, and the people spoke, and they voted for Hamas. Israel refused to recognize the elections. Israel refused to deal with the Hamas-led government, although it was a moderate government which called for a long-term ceasefire with Israel, negotiations for a long-term ceasefire. And European Union and the United States, to their eternal shame, backed Israel in refusing to recognize the results of a democratic election and joined Israel in economic warfare to undermine the Hamas government. And there was a conspiracy. I use the word deliberately because I've seen the documents, the Palestine papers that were released. They showed that there was a conspiracy between Israel, between the American general who was training the Palestinian Authority forces, the Fatah, the Palestinian Authority, and Egyptian intelligence. There was a plot to isolate, weaken, and drive Hamas out of power. And there was going to be a Fatah coup and against Hamas, and Hamas preempted by seizing power violently in Gaza. This was in June 2007. Immediately after that, after it seized power, Israel imposed a blockade on Gaza, which is still in force today. So Gaza is under blockade. A blockade is a form of collective punishment which is prescribed under international law. So here are two examples of how my narrative, and I am a historian and I've studied this subject, completely contradicts the dominant Zionist narrative which is widely accepted around the world.
Consider what it is that Joe Biden is saying here when he wants the elected representatives of Palestinian people to be eliminated, completely eliminated. How do you find a solution when that is the mindset that we're dealing with? And that's the first person.
Prime Minister Sunak, all the Western leaders, they all support Israel's right for self-defense, because you cannot imagine British Prime Minister that those type of atrocities will happen in his home in Manchester or in London, and the British Army won't respond.
What's the view on the humanitarian crisis in Gaza this morning?
There is no humanitarian crisis because...
There isn't?
There is no. Israel is in charge of the safety of the Israelis. Hamas is in charge of the safety of the Palestinians. Hamas abused every single...
Very difficult to get to understand the narrative here that they are trying to send around. So she says clearly there is no humanitarian crisis in Gaza. She's being asked, what about the humanitarian crisis in Gaza? She says there's none. Of course, in a way, she's right, because her colleague, the defense minister of Israel, said, we're dealing with animals here. So, of course, if you have a humanitarian crisis, you obviously need to have human beings. And since Israel does not recognize that those in Gaza are human beings, you can't have a humanitarian crisis. And they do not believe, obviously, that even animals have rights. I mean, I don't agree with that, because I'm an animal lover. I have animals in my home, but for them, animals don't have rights. You can bomb them. And so, and if you consider that those in Gaza are animals, as the defense minister says, then obviously you can't talk about the rights of Palestinians in Gaza because they're not human. But then by the same breath, she talks about Hamas being responsible for people in Gaza. So Hamas is responsible for people in Gaza. But then Joe Biden tells us that Hamas should be eliminated. How does it work? If you want to eliminate an organization, how can they be responsible for people? And so if they are responsible for people, then they have been elected by these people. It's very difficult to understand which kind of mindset we are dealing with here. Now listen to the former Prime Minister. I forget his name now. We'll see his name on the screen when we see him.
And what about those Palestinians in hospital who are on life support, and babies and incubators whose life support and incubator will have to be turned off because the Israelis have cut the power to Gaza?
Are you seriously keep on asking me about Palestinian civilians? What's wrong with you? Have you not seen what happened? We're fighting Nazis. We don't target them. Now, the world can come and bring them anything they want. If you want to bring them electricity, I'm not going to feed electricity or water to my enemies. If anyone else wants, that's fine. We're not responsible for them.
This is the point.
But you keep on. I want to tell you. No, listen. You listen to me right now. I've heard you enough.
No, I understand. We're trying to have a conversation here. Listen, this is my program. This is my show. And I am asking the questions. You're raising your voice, and I've asked you, and we've already stopped, please, and let me finish. We've already distinguished between Hamas.
I want to tell you, shame on you.
You're trying to speak over me.
We are not. Shame on you.
It's nothing about shame. We're trying to have a conversation about a very serious situation here, and you are refusing to address it.
Jump over immediately, and again, you
absolutely
use the
not.
Palestinian narrative.
You are incorrect.
They are responsible, because I can tell you that when the UK, when Great Britain was fighting the Nazis during World War II, no one asked what's going on in Dresden. It was the Nazis targeting London, and you targeted Dresden. So shame on you if you go on with that false narrative.
We're not talking about that, and in hindsight, many people have readdressed that kind of carpet bombing.
Babies. Oh, I see. Now you're Mr. Clean. Shame on you.
Absolutely not. And I'm not. Listen, Mr. Bennett, I am not in the military. I am a journalist asking you questions. Are you going to let me ask you a question, or you continue shouting at me? We've already distinguished between Hamas and the Palestinians. I'm asking you very directly.
What do you want to ask?
Is going to be done to make sure that those innocent people don't get killed, as innocent Jewish people were killed on Saturday?
Well, we're going to target Hamas, and we're telling Hamas that if you use anyone as your human shield, and you're going to shoot at us using human shields, that it's their responsibility.
There you are. Very clear. It is, the mindset is uniform. There is no humanitarian crisis, they tell you. The other one is telling you that if Hamas uses human shield, now he's talking about an area that is 365 kilometers square, an area where every kilometer has more than 5,000 people in it. I don't know where they're supposed to hide so that they do not become a human shield. Of course, now they're trying to move about 1 million down south with no guarantee of coming back home. And after the south move to south, they will try to move them out of Gaza completely. Ethnic cleansing is going on with the help of big powers. Israel is trying to achieve exactly that. Either bomb you where you are or leave the place. And then, of course, you've got Joe Biden, the man himself, the Democrat, who tells you, let's eliminate them. Doesn't matter that they've been elected. Let's eliminate them. Why? Because Hamas will not sign on the dotted lines. They will not sign on anything that does not give the Palestinians the full rights. And that is not acceptable, because Israel is not willing to recognize Palestinians have rights. And Hamas is not willing to accept any deal that does not recognize that Palestinians have rights. That's the clash between the two sides. And that's the fight between the two sides. A side that does not want to recognize that Palestinians have rights, and a side that does not want to accept the idea that Palestinians have no rights. And between those two sides, the global powers that be are supporting the side that says Palestinians are animals. They don't have rights. That's the final word. See you soon. We will analyze why Zionism is an ideology that is not compatible with peace, not compatible with coexistence, and like apartheid, like Nazism, Zionism must also be dismantled. I leave you with some of these images that I'm collecting that should be a reminder for us of what's going on, and a reminder for us for the need to support the Palestinians on this. All of us, almost all of us, have got one type of social media account or another. We will have plenty of time to share and forward jokes and forward family stories and personal stories and picnics and holiday videos and holiday stories in our social media. But this time, let us dedicate our energies in social media to sharing the stories of what is happening to the Palestinians. The Palestinians are not asking us to give up our lives, to go take arms and fight for them. That's not what they're asking us. They're doing it themselves. They're on the front lines. They are making all the sacrifice. The most significant sacrifice any human being can make is being made by the Palestinians in Palestine. This fight is now in Palestine. It's not out of Palestine. Despite the fact that Joe Biden and his ships are coming here to try to make it an international fight, which I hope it doesn't turn out to be an international fight. We will see. If the Americans get directly involved, then all bets are off. Nobody can tell us or will be able to stop this fight becoming international. But so far, it is a local fight here. And the Palestinians are not asking us to become personally involved in the fight, take up arms for them. But they are asking for our support. They are asking for us to spend our energy, our time, and if we have money, our money, to support them to end so that they can come out of this. They can win this. This is a very important fight. They are fighting for their lives. They are not just fighting for a piece of land. They are actually, literally fighting for their lives and the lives of their kids. And we owe it to them to help them succeed and survive. Thank you very much.